My 8-year-old daughter approached me at her big sister's wedding and asked, "Mama, why is Daddy hurting that white lady in the tent?" In that moment, I knew my marriage was over, but I didn't cry. I grabbed the microphone. What I said next made the mistress run away in tears. The mirror in the hallway has been in my family for 3 generations. It saw my mother smooth her skirts before church. It saw me on the day I graduated nursing school. And today, it was seeing me, Olivia Jenkins, on the proudest day of my life. I adjusted the brim of my hat, a wide cream-colored piece with a silk magnolia on the side. I looked at the woman staring back at me, 58 years old. There were lines around my eyes, yes, but they were lines of laughter and hard work. My skin still held that deep, warm glow of mahogany thanks to the cocoa butter I've used since I was a girl. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of roasted chicken and sweet tea drifting in from the kitchen. Today was Tina's wedding, my eldest baby. "Lord, I just ask you to cover this house today," I whispered, closing my eyes for a brief second. "Let no weapon formed against this joy prosper." If only I had known how close the weapon was. If I had known that the enemy wasn't just at the gate but was already parking her silver Mercedes in my driveway, I might have prayed a very different prayer. Plus one Olivia, Livy, I turned to see Carl coming down the stairs. My husband of 35 years. He looked handsome. I couldn't deny that. The tuxedo hid the little bit of a belly he'd grown since he took that desk job at the corporate office downtown. He was sweating, though. More than usual for a July afternoon in Georgia. He was wiping his forehead with a handkerchief, and his eyes were darting around the room like a trapped bird. "You look beautiful, Liv," he said, but he didn't really look at me. He was looking past me, out the window. "And you look like you're about to faint, Carl," I said, stepping forward to fix his bow tie. I brushed a piece of lint off his lapel. "Stop worrying. The caterers are here, the pastor is here, and Tina is upstairs looking like an angel. Everything is under control." He flinched when I touched him. Just a tiny, almost imperceptible jerk away from my hand. It was something small, but after 35 years, you learn the language of your partner's body better than you know your own Bible verses. "I'm not worried about the wedding," he mumbled, pulling away to check his phone again. Look, Liv, I need to tell you something. I invited Miss Evelyn." I froze. My hands hovered in the air where his chest had been. "Miss Evelyn," I repeated, the name tasting like vinegar in my mouth. "Your boss? The woman who made you work through Thanksgiving? The one who calls you Charles because she says Carl sounds too informal? Plus one, she's the regional director now, Olivia," Carl snapped, his voice rising in a way that made me narrow my eyes. I couldn't say no. She hinted that she wanted to see how we celebrate. It's politics. I have to play the game if I want that pension secure. This is our daughter's wedding, Carl. "Not a board meeting," I said, keeping my voice low and steady. "That's the thing about me. I don't shout. I don't have to. But if she is here, she will be treated with respect. Just make sure she understands that today you are a father and a husband, not an employee." Carl looked relieved, but there was something else in his eyes. Guilt. Fear. Before I could decipher it, the doorbell rang. It wasn't the warm, melodic chime of family arriving. It was a sharp, demanding ring. I didn't know it then, but that doorbell was the sound of my old life ending. We were about to open the door to the devil herself. I thought I was just being a gracious hostess welcoming a difficult guest. I had no idea that in just a few hours I would be wishing I had slammed that door in her face. But what happened next when she stepped across my threshold was the first sign that this woman didn't just want my husband's time. She wanted his soul, and she thought I was too old and too blind to see it. Don't go anywhere. You need to see the audacity of this woman. Most people bring a gift to a wedding. She brought destruction wrapped in silk. I opened the door, and the heat of the Georgia afternoon rushed in, but it was nothing compared to the chill that radiated from the woman standing on my porch. It wasn't just that she was white. We had neighbors and friends of all colors. It was the way she stood there. She didn't stand like a guest waiting to be welcomed. She stood like a health inspector coming to shut down a restaurant. "Is this the Jenkins residence?" she asked. She didn't look at me. She was looking past my shoulder, scanning the foyer, likely calculating the square footage. "It is," I said, my voice smooth as butter but firm as a cast-iron skillet. "And you must be Ms. Evelyn. Carl told us you might be stopping by." She finally looked at me. Her eyes were a piercing, icy blue, framed by expensive makeup that tried too hard to hide the lines around her mouth. She was wearing a dress that cost more than my first car, a sharp silver thing that stopped mid-thigh, inappropriate for a church wedding, inappropriate for a grandmother's house, but perfect for a woman who wanted every eye in the room on her. "Oh," she said, her smile not reaching those cold eyes, "you must be the wife." "I am Olivia," I corrected her, stepping back just enough to let her in, though every instinct in my spirit screamed to lock the screen door. "Carl's wife of 35 years. Please, come in. We were just about to head to the backyard for the ceremony." Carl appeared behind me, breathless. "Evelyn! You made it. I wasn't sure you'd find the place. The GPS can be tricky out here." "Charles," she purred. She called him Charles. "My husband's name is Carl. Everyone knows that." It was a bit of a trek, but I was curious. "You're always talking about your little projects." She waved a hand vaguely at my home. "Little projects." This house was built on double shifts and overtime. This house was where we raised 3 children, buried 2 dogs, and held prayer circles that shook the walls. And she called it a little project. I saw Carl flinch, but he didn't correct her. Instead, he took her coat, acting more like a bellboy at a hotel than the man of the house. "Can I get you something, Evelyn?" "Water? Sparkling water?" he asked, his voice pitching up an octave. "Tap is fine, Charles. I'm sure that's what you have," she said, walking into the living room without waiting for an invitation. She picked up a framed photo of Tina from the mantel, my baby girl in her graduation gown. Evelyn held it with 2 fingers as if it might be sticky. Charming. I took a deep breath, reciting Psalm 23 in my head. "He restoreth my soul." I walked over and gently took the picture from her hand, placing it back exactly where it belonged. "We are very proud of Tina," I said, meeting her gaze. "She's an engineer now. She built this life with her own mind, much like her father and I built this home." Evelyn chuckled, a dry, brittle sound. "That's sweet. It's good to have aspirations." At that moment, I wanted to tell her exactly where she could put her aspirations, but I didn't. I held my tongue for Tina's sake. I thought I was being the bigger person. I didn't know that while I was playing the gracious hostess, she was already planning her next move. If I had known what she whispered to Carl while I was in the kitchen getting her water, I would have dragged her out by her expensive hair right then and there. "The ceremony is starting in 10 minutes, I announced, checking the grandfather clock. "Carl, you need to be with Tina. She needs her father before she walks down the aisle." Right, Carl nodded, wiping sweat from his upper lip. He looked at Evelyn. Will you be okay here? Or, oh, I'll find a spot, Evelyn said, looking him up and down in a way that made my stomach turn. It wasn't sexual exactly. It was possessive. Like a farmer looking at a prize bull. Don't worry about me, Charles. Go do your duty. The way she said duty made it sound like a chore, like a burden. I took Carl's arm, my grip tight enough to leave a mark. Come, husband, we have a daughter to marry. We walked towards the back door, leaving her standing in the middle of my living room. But even as we walked away, I could feel her eyes on our backs. It felt like a target laser. Why is she really here, Carl? I hissed as soon as we were out of earshot. I told you, Liv, it's work politics, Carl hissed back, pulling his arm away. She's reviewing the regional managers next week. If she sees I'm a family man, stable, it looks good. She called you Charles, I said, and she looked at our house like it was a zoo exhibit. You're being sensitive, he snapped. It was the first time he had raised his voice at me in years. Just be nice, Olivia, please, for me. I looked at him, really looked at him. The gray in his beard, the fear in his eyes. He looked small. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel love. I felt pity. I will be nice, I said, smoothing my dress. But you better make sure she knows her place, because if she disrespects my family again, God himself won't be able to save her from me. We stepped out into the garden. The sun was shining, the choir was humming the opening notes of Amazing Grace, and Tina was waiting. It should have been perfect, but as I took my seat in the front row, I saw Evelyn slip into the back. She didn't sit in the chairs set up for guests. She stood near the catering tent, leaning against a post, watching, not watching the bride, watching my husband, and that's when I saw it. A quick, subtle hand signal. She touched her ear, then pointed to the tent, and Carl, standing at the altar waiting for his daughter, gave a barely perceptible nod. My heart stopped. They had a code. In my house, at my daughter's wedding, they had a secret language. I should have stood up and screamed, but the music swelled and everyone stood for the bride. I was trapped in my seat, forced to smile while my world began to crack. But stay with me, because what happened during the vows was nothing compared to what I found when the music stopped. The ceremony was beautiful. I cried when Tina said, I do, just like every mother does. But my tears weren't just tears of joy. They were tears of relief that the roof hadn't caved in on us yet. I watched Carl standing there, holding Tina's hand before giving her away. He looked the part of the proud father perfectly. If you didn't know him like I did, you'd think he was the happiest man in Georgia. But I saw the sheen of sweat that wasn't from the heat. I saw how his eyes kept flicking to the back row where a splash of red dress stood out against the garden greenery like a fresh wound. I now pronounce you man and wife, Pastor Jenkins boomed, and the crowd erupted in cheers. I clapped until my hands stung, putting on the mask I've worn for decades, the mask of the strong, unshakable black woman, the matriarch, but inside my spirit was trembling. FOMO hook. We moved to the reception area under the big white tent. The smell of barbecue ribs and my sister's famous mac and cheese filled the air. The DJ started playing before I let go, and folks were already lining up for the electric slide. It was the kind of joy you want to bottle up and keep forever. But I couldn't enjoy it, because while everyone was watching the bride, I was watching the 2 empty chairs at the head table. You won't believe who was missing, and where they actually were. "Mama, where's Daddy?" Tina asked, breathless from dancing, her veil slightly askew. "The photographer wants to do the family portraits now while the light is good." I scanned the crowd. Uncle Ray was laughing with the bridesmaids. My cousin Sheila was piling her plate high with potato salad. But Carl? Carl was gone. And so was she. He He probably just went to the restroom, baby. I lied, smoothing a stray curl from her forehead. You know how his stomach gets when he's nervous. You go start with the bridesmaids. I'll fetch him. I turned away from my daughter, my smile dropping instantly. I marched through the crowd, nodding at guests, accepting compliments on the centerpieces, but my eyes were sharp as a hawk's. Where are you, Carl? Don't you dare embarrass us today. I checked the house. The kitchen was full of caterers. The living room was empty, save for a few elderly aunts resting their feet. I checked the front porch. His car was still there, parked right next to her silver Mercedes. Then I saw it, the VIP tent. We had set up a small private tent near the back of the property behind the rose bushes. It was meant for the bridal party to change or catch a breath away from the guests. It was supposed to be a sanctuary. But as I walked across the lawn, the grass sinking under my heels, I noticed the flap was zipped shut. My heart started hammering against my ribs. I wanted to turn around. I wanted to go back to the party, dance with my nephew, and pretend everything was fine. But the Holy Spirit whispered, "Go look, Olivia." And I listen when he speaks. I didn't know that what was waiting for me wasn't just a betrayal. It was a scene so disrespectful it would make a saint curse. But before I could even reach the zipper, I saw something that stopped me cold. My youngest, Maya. My 8-year-old baby was standing about 10 feet from that tent. She was clutching her flower girl basket and she looked frozen. She wasn't playing. She wasn't chasing butterflies. She was staring at that zipped-up tent with an expression I had never seen on a child's face before. It was confusion mixed with fear. "Maya?" I called out softly, not wanting to startle her. She jumped and spun around. Her big brown eyes were wide. "Mama!" she whispered, running to me and burying her face in my skirt. "What is it, baby? Why are you back here all alone?" I stroked her braids, my eyes still fixed on the tent that was vibrating slightly, though there was no wind. Maya looked up at me, and her next words snatched the breath right out of my lungs. "Mama," she said, her voice trembling, "I was looking for Daddy to show him my basket." She pointed a small, shaking finger at the tent. I felt a cold dread wash over me, hotter than the Georgia sun. I knew, deep down I knew, but hearing it from my child, that was different. Maya took a breath to ask her question, and I knew that once she asked it, our family would never be the same. Stay tuned, because the question she asked didn't just break my heart. It gave me the ammunition I needed to end them both. The world seemed to slow down. The music from the reception, the thumping bass of "We Are Family," sounded like it was coming from underwater. All I could hear was the ragged breathing of my 8-year-old daughter and the blood rushing in my own ears. Maya looked up at me, her big brown eyes filled with a confusion that no child should ever have to carry. She twisted the hem of her flower girl dress, a nervous habit she got from her father. "Mama," she whispered, leaning in as if sharing a secret that was too heavy for her small frame. "I went to show Daddy my basket, but the tent is closed, and I heard them." My hand tightened on her shoulder, perhaps a little too hard because she winced. I immediately softened my grip, stroking her hair. "Heard who, baby? Who is in the tent?" I prayed she would say it was the caterers. I prayed she would say it was Uncle Ray taking a nap. I prayed for anything other than the truth. But Maya took a breath and delivered the sentence that shattered my 35-year marriage into dust. "Daddy," she said clearly. "He's in there with the white lady. And Mama, why is Daddy hurting her?" My knees almost gave out. I had to grab the back of a garden chair to keep upright. It was husky, commanding. Is this what you wanted? That was Carl. My Carl. But his voice sounded different. It lacked the warmth it had when he spoke to me. It sounded desperate, subservient. I take what I want, Charles. You know that. I stood just inches from the canvas. I could see their silhouettes against the side of the tent where the sun hit it. Two shadows merging into one grotesque shape. I raised my hand to rip the zipper open. I wanted to expose them to the sunlight, to the preacher, to the world. My fingers brushed the cold metal of the zipper tab. But then I stopped. Why? Because I realized that catching them wasn't enough. Destroying them. That required a plan. I didn't open the tent. Instead, I leaned in closer, listening. I needed ammunition. I needed to know exactly how deep the rot went. What about her? Carl's voice came through, breathless. The old ball and chain? Don't worry about Olivia, Evelyn laughed, a low, throaty sound that made my skin crawl. She's clueless. She's busy serving cake. She's a good little housewife, Charles. She doesn't have the spine to leave you. Besides, you need this job, and I am the job. I know, Carl groaned. I know who the boss is. Good boy. My hand fell from the zipper. They weren't just having an affair. They were laughing at me. They were mocking my devotion, my role as a mother, my very existence. She called me a good little housewife. She thought I was weak. She thought I was safe. I stepped back, my heels sinking into the soft earth. Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not for them. I looked at the tent one last time. It looked like a tumor growing in the middle of my beautiful garden. You think I'm clueless? I whispered to the closed canvas. You think I have no spine? I turned around and began to walk back toward the reception. The music had changed to a slow jam. Couples were swaying. The love in the air felt like a lie. But as I walked, I wasn't the same Olivia who had walked away from the house an hour ago. That Olivia died the moment Maya asked her question. The woman walking back to the party was someone else entirely. I wasn't going to make a scene, not yet. I wiped my face, fixed my hat, and walked straight toward the DJ booth. Carl thought he was safe in that tent. Evelyn thought she owned him and me, but they forgot one thing. I paid the DJ. And I knew exactly where the microphone was. What I was about to do during the toasts wasn't just revenge, it was an exorcism. You think you've seen wedding drama? You haven't seen anything until you see a black mother protecting her dignity with a live mic. This is the moment where the sadness turns into strategy. If you believe a woman's silence is louder than her scream, hit that subscribe button. You need to see how I prepared for war while cutting the cake. I walked back toward the reception tent, placing one foot in front of the other with deliberate precision. My heels didn't sink into the grass anymore. I felt like I was walking on air, cold, thin air. The DJ had switched to a fast tempo, something by Earth, Wind, and Fire, and the brass section seemed to mock the pounding in my head. September. That was the song, do you remember? Bade ya, say do you remember? I remembered. I remembered Carl begging me for a second chance 10 years ago when he gambled away our savings. I remembered nursing him back to health when he had that scare with his heart. I remembered ironing his shirts every Sunday night so he would look professional for her. I walked past tables of laughing relatives. Cousin Sheila waved a chicken wing at me. "Liv, this sauce is the truth," she hollered. I smiled. It was a tight plastic smile that felt like it might crack my face. "Glad you like it, baby," I said, my voice sounding like it was coming from a radio in another room. I made a beeline for the house. I needed a mirror. I needed water. I needed Jesus. I rushed into the downstairs powder room and locked the door with trembling hands. I turned on the faucet, letting the cold water run over my wrists. I stared at myself in the vanity mirror. The woman looking back at me was terrified. Her eyes were wide, her breathing shallow. I wanted to collapse. I wanted to slide down the wall and wail until my throat bled. But then I saw something else in the reflection. A flicker of steel in my dark eyes. A reminder of who raised me. My grandmother didn't survive the Jim Crow South for me to let a woman in a cheap dress and a man with a wandering eye break me. Stay with me. Because what I decided in that bathroom changed the course of the entire evening. I splashed water on my face, careful not to ruin the mascara. I took a paper towel and dabbed my neck. "You are Olivia Jenkins," I whispered to the mirror. "You are the daughter of Sarah, the granddaughter of Hattie. You do not crumble. You conquer." I fixed my hat. I reapplied my lipstick, a shade called Warrior Red, fitting. When I unlocked the door, the terrified woman was gone. The strategist had taken her place. I walked back out to the patio. The first person I looked for was Beatrice, my sister, my rock. If anyone was going to help me bury the body, metaphorically speaking, of course, it was her. She was standing near the punch bowl, keeping a watchful eye on Maya, just as I had asked. Maya was eating a cupcake, looking calmer, but her eyes were still scanning the crowd for her father. I walked up to Beatrice and touched her elbow. "Sister," I said. Beatrice turned. She took one look at my face, my composed, frozen face, and her smile vanished. She put her cup down. "Liv, what is it? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse," I said, leaning in close so the guests wouldn't hear. "I saw a snake." I pulled her aside, behind a large arrangement of hydrangeas. I told her everything in 3 sentences. The tent. The moan. The way she called him Charles. Beatrice's face went through 3 stages, shock, denial, and then a rage so pure I could feel the heat coming off her. She reached for her earrings. You know it's serious when a black woman reaches for her earrings. "I'm going to kill him," Beatrice hissed, her hand already moving to take off her hoops. "I'm going to go into that tent and drag them both out by their—" "No." I grabbed her wrist. My grip was iron. "You will do no such thing, Bea." "Liv, are you crazy? He is disrespecting you in your house, at Tina's wedding." Her voice was rising, attracting the attention of a nearby waiter. "Lower your voice," I commanded. "We are not going to give them the satisfaction of a scene. Not yet. If we scream now, we look like the crazy ones. We look emotional. We look weak." "So what? We just let them eat our food and drink our wine?" Beatrice was trembling. "No," I said, my eyes narrowing as I looked toward the back of the garden. "We let them think they got away with it. We let them get comfortable. And then what? Then I take the microphone for the mother of the bride speech," I said coldly. Beatrice looked at me, confusion turning into a slow, wicked realization. "Oh, Liv, you wouldn't. Watch me." Just then, movement caught my eye. The zipper of the VIP tent opened. They were coming out. Carl stepped out first, looking around nervously, adjusting his cummerbund. Then she followed, smoothing that scandalous red dress, looking like the cat that just ate the canary and the cream. They thought they were slick. They thought no one noticed. But they didn't know that from behind the hydrangeas, 2 pairs of eyes were watching every move. And they certainly didn't expect what I was about to do when Carl tried to kiss my cheek 5 minutes later. I watched them walk across the lawn. To anyone else, they just looked like 2 guests returning from a stroll. But I knew better. I saw the way Carl quickly buttoned his jacket. I saw the way Evelyn smoothed her hair, that smug smile playing on her lips like she had just won a prize at the county fair. They separated before they reached the crowd. Smart, but not smart enough. Carl made a beeline for me. He was sweating profusely now, blotting his forehead with a handkerchief that I knew, deep down, smelled like her perfume. Liv, he called out, forcing a jovial tone that grated on my ears like sandpaper. There you are. I was just showing Evelyn the rose bushes. She loves gardening. Gardening. The audacity. He reached out to put his arm around my waist, leaning in to kiss my cheek. In 35 years of marriage, I've never pulled away from my husband, but today I moved. Just an inch. Just enough so that his lips landed on empty air. He froze. He looked at me, confusion flashing in his eyes. He knew something was wrong, but he was too arrogant to believe I knew the truth. Wait until you see what I spotted on his collar a second later. It was the final nail in his coffin. It's too hot for clinging, Carl, I said, fanning myself with a program. My voice was cool, detached. And you look disheveled. Oh, just the heat, he stammered, pulling at his collar. That's when I saw it. A faint ruby red smudge on the white collar of his tuxedo shirt. It wasn't my shade. I wear warrior red, a deep, rich crimson. This was bright, cheap scarlet, her shade. I stared at it. I wanted to reach out and rip the shirt off his back. I wanted to point at it and scream, "Look! Look at the mark of the beast." But I didn't. I simply reached out and flicked the collar with my fingernail. "You have a stain," I whispered. Carl went pale. His hand flew to his neck. "What? Where?" "Must be the punch," I lied, my eyes boring into his. "Be careful, Carl. Stains like that, they never come out. They ruin the whole fabric." He swallowed hard. He knew I wasn't talking about laundry. Before he could respond, the DJ's voice boomed over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's the moment we've all been waiting for. Can we get the bride and her father to the dance floor, please?" The opening notes of Luther Vandross' Dance with My Father began to play, a song that usually makes me weep with joy. Today, it sounded like a funeral dirge. Carl looked relieved to escape my gaze. I have to go dance with Tina." "Go," I said. "Don't keep your daughter waiting. She still thinks you're a hero." I watched him walk to the dance floor. I watched him take our beautiful, intelligent daughter in his arms. Tina rested her head on his shoulder, the same shoulder that woman had been clawing at 10 minutes ago. My stomach turned. I felt bile rise in my throat. I looked over at the bar. Evelyn was there, sipping champagne, watching them dance. She caught my eye, and then she winked. She winked at me. It wasn't a friendly wink, it was a power move. It said, "I have him, and you can't do anything about it because you're too scared to ruin the wedding." She raised her glass in a mock toast. My blood ran cold, then hot, boiling hot. She thought she had won. She thought I was just the old wife who would stand in the corner and cry. I turned to Beatrice, who was standing beside me, clutching her purse like a weapon. "Is it time?" Beatrice whispered. I looked at the DJ booth. The song was ending. The speeches were next. The best man, the maid of honor, and then the parents. "Almost," I said, smoothing my dress. "Let them finish the dance. Let him have his last moment of glory." The song ended. The applause was polite. Carl wiped a tear from his eye. The hypocrite. "And now," the DJ announced, "we have a few words from the family." I started walking, not toward the table, but toward the stage. The maid of honor was reaching for the microphone, but I was faster. I walked right past her, past Carl, past the shocked look on the wedding planner's face. I took the microphone from the stand. The feedback squealed for a second, silencing the room. Everyone looked at me. Carl looked terrified. Evelyn looked amused. They expected a sweet toast about love and commitment. Oh, they were going to get a lesson on commitment, all right, but not the kind they expected. The feedback from the microphone screeched through the speakers, a high-pitched wail that made half the guests cover their ears. It was a fitting sound. It sounded like a warning siren before a tornado touches down. The reception tent went dead silent. Forks paused halfway to mouths. The laughter at table 5 died instantly. Even the cicadas seemed to hold their breath. I stood center stage, clutching that wireless mic like it was the rod of Moses. My hand wasn't shaking anymore. My heart wasn't racing. A strange, icy calm had settled over me. It was the calm of a surgeon about to make the first incision. "Mama," Tina whispered from the head table. She looked confused, her brow furrowed under her veil. You wanted to say something?" I looked at my beautiful daughter. My baby, who had just promised her life to a man, believing in the sanctity of vows. I looked at her new husband, a good boy named Marcus, who was looking at me with respect. I hated that I had to do this. I hated that her wedding day would be remembered for this. But I knew that if I let this slide, if I let the devil sit at my table and eat my cake, the rot would eventually spread to Tina too. "Yes, baby," I said, my voice booming through the speakers, clear and strong. "I have a few words that the Spirit has laid on my heart." I saw Carl stiffen. He was sitting 2 seats away from Tina, his face glistening with sweat that wasn't from the humidity. He was gripping his water glass so hard I thought it might shatter. He met my eyes and I saw a silent plea. "Don't. Please, Liv, don't." He thought I was just going to make a passive-aggressive comment. He thought I would be classy and suffer in silence. He had no idea that I had already signaled the videographer to keep recording. You won't believe the look on his face when I started quoting scripture. "Marriage," I began, letting the word hang in the humid air. "We talk a lot about love today. We talk about for better or for worse. We talk about sickness and health." I started walking. I didn't stay on the little wooden stage. I stepped down onto the grass, moving among the tables. The guests turned in their chairs to follow me. I was the shepherd, and they were the flock, waiting to see where I would lead them. "But we don't talk enough about respect," I continued, my heels clicking on the temporary dance floor parquet as I moved closer to the VIP section. "We don't talk about the covenant. You see, a covenant isn't just a contract you sign, it's a blood oath. It means you protect your home from wolves, even if the wolf is wearing a silk suit or a red dress." A murmur went through the crowd. Amen. I saw Evelyn. She was sitting at table 3, reserved for business associates. She was swirling her champagne, looking bored. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at her phone. The disrespect. The utter casual disrespect. "You see," I said, raising my voice slightly, injecting it with the cadence of a Sunday morning testimony. "Some people think marriage is a convenience, a prop. Something you keep on the shelf to look respectable while you do your dirt in the dark." Carl started to stand up. "Liv," he croaked, but he didn't have a mic. No one heard him but the people right next to him. "Sit down, husband," I said. I didn't yell it. I said it with the authority of a woman who has washed his underwear for 3 decades. "I am not finished." He sat. He collapsed, really. The tension in the tent was thick enough to cut with a knife. Cousin Sheila stopped chewing. Pastor Jenkins adjusted his glasses, sensing a sermon he hadn't prepared for. I was circling closer to Evelyn's table. I could see the moment she realized this wasn't a generic speech. She looked up from her phone, and for the first time, that smug smile faltered. She saw the fire in my eyes. But she was about to make a mistake, a fatal mistake that would give me the perfect opening to destroy her. "We have guests here today," I said, stopping right in front of table 3. "Distinguished guests. Guests who drove a long way." Evelyn straightened up, smoothing her dress. She thought I was about to compliment her. She thought, in her arrogance, that I was bowing down to her status as the regional director. She actually preened, puffing out her chest. "Guests who think that because they have a title," I said, my voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerous, "that they can walk into a sanctuary and defile it." "Excuse me?" Evelyn said. It was loud enough for the mic to pick up. The crowd gasped. "You don't interrupt the mother of the bride." I turned to her, fully, finally. "I wasn't speaking to you, Ms. Evelyn." I smiled. It was a terrifying smile. "But since you piped up, let's talk about what I saw in the garden tent 10 minutes ago." The air left the room. It was a vacuum of shock. Carl buried his face in his hands. Evelyn's glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. Crash. But the sound of breaking glass was nothing compared to the sound of her reputation shattering a second later. I didn't just tell them what I saw. I asked the DJ to play a very specific sound clip I had recorded on my phone just outside the tent. The sound of Evelyn's champagne flute shattering on the patio pavers echoed like a gunshot. Crystal shards scattered around her expensive red heels, sparkling in the late afternoon sun. For a second, no one moved. The only sound was the hum of the amplifier and the distant bark of a neighbor's dog. "Broken glass?" I said into the microphone, my voice steady as a heartbeat. "They say it's bad luck. But I think today, it's just a sign that something fake has finally been destroyed." Evelyn stared at the broken glass, her face a mask of shock. For the first time all day, she looked small. She looked cheap. "You're crazy," she hissed, finally finding her voice. It was thin and shaky, stripped of all that corporate arrogance. "Charles, do something. She's making a scene." Carl stood up, his legs wobbling. "Liv, please. Let's talk about this inside, not here, not now." "Inside?" I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Oh no, husband, you didn't keep it inside when you took her into my garden tent. You didn't keep it inside when you let her mock this family. So we are going to finish it right here, under the open sky." I turned to the DJ, a young man named Earl, who grew up in our church. He looked terrified, his hand hovering over the mixer. "Earl, baby," I said sweetly, "play the file I airdropped you, the one labeled The Truth." Earl looked at Carl, then at me. He saw the fire in my eyes. He made the right choice. He pressed play. The speakers crackled for a moment. Then a voice filled the tent. It wasn't music. It was the unmistakable husky voice of Evelyn, recorded clearly through the thin canvas walls just 20 minutes ago. The quality was rough, but the words were crystal clear. What the guests heard next made the church deacons gasp and my sister Beatrice stand up with a look that could kill. "Don't worry about Olivia. She's clueless. She's busy serving cake. She's a good little housewife, Charles. Besides, you need this job, and I am the job." Then, Carl's voice sounding pathetic and weak, I know who the boss is." And finally, Evelyn's laugh, that cruel, mocking laugh that I had heard with my own ears. "This whole family man act is cute, but we both know who really owns you." The recording cut off. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It was the silence of a congregation that had just seen the devil walk into the sanctuary. Every eye in the room turned to table 3. Evelyn's face went from pale to a deep, blotchy red. She grabbed her purse, her knuckles white. She looked around for an ally, but found only walls of judgment. "This is illegal!" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "You recorded me without my consent. I'll sue you. I'll ruin you." I took a step toward her. Just one step, but it was enough to make her flinch. "You are in my house, Evelyn," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that the mic picked up perfectly. "You are on my land, and you just disrespected my marriage, my daughter, and my God. You think you can sue me? Go ahead. But right now you have exactly 30 seconds to get your silver car off my driveway before my sister Beatrice helps you find the exit." I pointed to Beatrice. She was already rolling up her sleeves, looking like she was ready to go to war. Evelyn looked at Carl. "Charles? Are you going to let her speak to me like that?" Carl looked at her. Then he looked at me. He looked at Tina, who was crying silently in her new husband's arms. He looked at the ruin of his reputation. "Go," Carl whispered. He didn't look up. "Just go, Evelyn." "Fine," she spat. She kicked a piece of broken glass aside and stormed out, her heels clicking angrily on the pavement. "You're all pathetic. You deserve each other." She disappeared around the corner of the house. We heard her car engine roar to life and tires screech as she peeled out of the driveway. She was gone, but the mess she left behind was still standing right there in a tuxedo. I turned my attention back to Carl. He was slumped in his chair, a broken man. The guests were whispering furiously. I knew I had to end this speech. I had to close the wound I had just ripped open. But before I put the mic down, I had one last thing to say to my husband and one thing to say to my daughter. What I said next wasn't about anger. It was about the cost of freedom. The sound of Evelyn's engine fading down the street felt like the first breath of fresh air I had taken all day. The heavy, humid silence of the tent rushed back in, but it felt different now. It wasn't the silence of secrets. It was the silence of truth. And the truth, as the Bible says, shall set you free, even if it hurts like fire at first. I stood there, the microphone still in my hand, looking at the sea of faces, my cousins, my neighbors, my church family. They looked stunned. Some were covering their mouths. Others were nodding slowly, their eyes filled with a mixture of shock and that deep, ancient understanding that Black women share when they see a sister standing in the storm. Carl was still sitting there, looking at the empty space where Evelyn had been. He looked like a man whose house had just collapsed because he built it on sand. "Live," he whispered, his voice cracking. He reached a hand toward me, a hand I had held during childbirth, a hand I had held at his mother's funeral, a hand that had been touching another woman in a tent just 20 minutes ago. I didn't flinch this time. I simply took a step back. "Don't," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but the microphone carried it to every corner of the yard. "Do not touch me, Carl. Not with those hands." The guests held their breath. They expected me to scream. They expected me to throw the cake. But I had something much more powerful than rage. I had dignity. And I was about to use it to turn this disaster into a lesson my daughter would never forget. Stay tuned, because what I said to Tina right then is something every mother should tell her daughter before she walks down the aisle. I turned my back on him. I looked at Tina. My baby girl was standing by the head table, her mascara running down her cheeks, her new husband holding her tight. She looked broken. "Tina, baby," I said, softening my voice. "I am sorry I had to do this on your day. I know you wanted a fairy tale." "Mama," she sobbed, "why? Why today?" "Because," I said, walking toward her, ignoring Carl entirely. Because a lie cannot live in the light, and I would rather you cry today over the truth than cry for 20 years over a lie like I did. A murmur of amen rippled through the older women in the crowd. They knew. I raised you to be a strong woman, Tina, I continued, looking her dead in the eye. I raised you to know your worth. And part of knowing your worth is knowing when to cut out the rot, even if it's family, especially if it's family. I looked back at Carl. He had buried his head in his hands. This man, I gestured to him with the mic, made a choice. He chose his ego. He chose his boss. He chose to disrespect the covenant we made before God, and now he has to live with that choice. I signaled to Earl, the DJ. He looked terrified, poor boy. Earl, I said, put on some gospel, put on Victory is Mine, because the devil tried it today, but he did not win. As the music started, hesitant at first, then louder, the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't a party anymore, it was a revival. But I wasn't done with Carl yet. He thought he could just sit there and ride out the storm. He thought he could sleep in the guest room tonight. Oh, honey, no. I walked over to him, lowered the microphone, and whispered 5 words in his ear that made him stand up and leave his own daughter's wedding without looking back. I leaned in close. I could smell the sweat and the fear on him. Get out of my sight, I whispered. The locks will be changed by sunset. Carl looked at me. He saw the wall I had built. He saw that the door was not just closed, it was bricked over. He stood up. He looked at Tina, but she turned her face away into her husband's chest. He looked at his brother, Ray, but Ray just shook his head and took a sip of iced tea. Carl turned and walked away. He walked past the buffet he paid for, past the guests he wanted to impress, and out the side gate. He walked alone. I watched him go. And as he disappeared, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I was carrying for years. The music swelled. Victory is mine. Victory is mine. I looked at Beatrice. She was smiling through her tears. She came over and wrapped her arms around me. You did good, Liv, she whispered. You stood tall. I'm not done, Bay, I said, wiping my eyes. The party's over, but the war for my house has just begun. Carl was gone, but his mess remained, and I knew that Evelyn wasn't the type to go quietly. She had money, she had lawyers, and she had a vindictive streak a mile wide. But she forgot one thing. I had the deed to the house, and I had 40 years of diaries. When the lawyers got involved the next morning, they found something in Carl's financial records that turned this from a divorce into a criminal investigation. The sun went down on Tina's wedding day, and by the time the moon was high over Atlanta, the locks on my front door were changed. I paid the locksmith double to come out on a Saturday night. He was a good man from the choir, Mr. Henderson. He didn't ask questions. He just saw my face, saw the red eyes, and got to work. You safe here, Sister Olivia? He asked as he handed me the new keys. They felt heavy and cold in my palm. I am now, Mr. Henderson, I said. I am now. That night, the house felt big and empty. The silence was loud, but it wasn't lonely. Beatrice stayed over, sleeping in the guest room, the room Carl used to retreat to when he was working late. We sat up drinking tea, going through bank statements, and that's when the second shoe dropped. Liv, Beatrice said, her reading glasses perched on her nose, a stack of papers in her hand. Look at this. I took the statement. It was for our joint savings account, the Retirement Dream Fund. The money we were saving for a cruise to Alaska. There were withdrawals. Large ones. 500 here, 1,000 there. Consulting fees, the memo said. Transfers to an account I didn't recognize. He drained it, I whispered. Over 6 months. He drained nearly $20,000. My hand shook. Not with sadness this time, but with a cold, hard fury. He didn't just cheat on my body, he cheated on my labor. He stole the sweat off my brow to pay for dinners with her. I could have cried, I could have called him and screamed, but I didn't. I did something much more dangerous. I called my nephew David. David isn't a locksmith, David is a forensic accountant. And what he found the next morning didn't just implicate Carl, it implicated Evelyn and the entire regional office. You think a love affair is scandalous? Wait until you hear about the embezzlement scheme they were running under the guise of business trips. Monday morning came. I put on my best Sunday suit, a navy blue number that says, I mean business. I walked into the lawyer's office with David by my side. Carl was there. He looked terrible. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. He probably slept in his car or maybe at her place. I didn't care. Olivia, he started, standing up when I entered. Please, can we just sit down? My lawyer, Mrs. Higgins, said. She was a shark in pearls. Mr. Jenkins, we are filing for divorce on the grounds of adultery, emotional cruelty, and financial dissipation of marital assets. Carl's lawyer, a young man who looked like he hadn't started shaving yet, shuffled his papers. Now hang on. The house is marital property. The house, I interrupted, placing a thick envelope on the mahogany table, was built on land inherited from my grandfather, and the mortgage was paid from my nursing salary while Carl was finding himself in the 90s. But that's not what we're here to talk about. David slid a folder across the table. We found the transfers, Carl, David said calmly, to ES Consulting, Evelyn Sinclair, using company funds mixed with personal savings. That's wire fraud, Uncle Carl. Carl's face went gray. You wouldn't. I don't have to, I said, leaning back in my chair. The IRS does that work for me. Carl looked at me like he had never seen me before. He realized then that the woman who cooked his greens and ironed his shirts was also the woman who balanced the books. He signed the papers. He signed everything. The house, the car, the full custody of our peace of mind. But the best part? Evelyn wasn't getting away clean either. While we were in that office, a little email was making its way to the corporate HR department of their company. We walked out of that office 2 hours later. I was a single woman, I was a homeowner, and I was free. But the story didn't end there. 2 days later, I was at the grocery store picking up peaches. My phone buzzed. It was a text from a friend who still worked at Carl's office building. Girl, you won't believe who just got escorted out by security with a box. Attached was a blurry photo. It was Evelyn. She wasn't wearing red this time. She was wearing gray, and she looked furious. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just looked at the peaches. They were ripe. They were sweet. God is good, I whispered to the produce section. I went home and baked a cobbler. That evening, Tina came over with Marcus. She looked better. The shock had worn off, and she was angry, but she was healing. We sat on the porch, watching Maya chase fireflies in the yard that was fully mine now. Mama, Tina said, resting her head on my shoulder. Are you okay? Really? I looked at the sunset. I thought about the 35 years I spent building a life with a man who didn't respect it. I thought about the pain. But then I looked at my girls. I looked at the house standing strong behind me. I'm better than okay, baby, I said. I'm cleansed. I thought the war was over. I thought I had buried the demons, but the devil doesn't like to lose. Just as we were about to cut into that cobbler, a car pulled up. It wasn't Carl. It wasn't Evelyn. It was a police cruiser. And for a split second, my heart stopped. Had they come for me? Had Evelyn twisted the story? Stay tuned for the final moment of this saga, because what the officer handed me wasn't a warrant. It was a letter that changed everything. The blue lights of the police cruiser flashed against the white siding of my house, illuminating the hydrangeas I had planted with Carl 20 years ago. My heart hammered for a second, not out of fear, but out of exhaustion. Had he done something foolish? Had he come back with a gun? Officer Jamal, a young man I had taught in Sunday school, stepped out of the car. He took off his hat as he walked up the driveway. That was a good sign. You don't take off your hat if you're there to arrest the lady of the house. Evening, Sister Olivia, Jamal said, his voice respectful. I apologize for disturbing your supper. It's all right, Jamal, I said, wiping my hands on my apron. Is it Carl? Yes, ma'am, Jamal nodded. He looked uncomfortable. We picked him up about an hour ago downtown. He and that woman, Miss Sinclair, they got into a specialized altercation in the hotel lobby where they were staying. It got loud. Property was damaged. I felt Tina stiffen beside me. A fight. On her wedding night, her father was in a brawl with his mistress in a hotel lobby. The shame of it tried to creep up my neck, but I pushed it down. That wasn't my shame to carry anymore. Are they in jail? Tina asked, her voice hard. They are being processed for disorderly conduct, Jamal said. But that's not why I'm here. When we booked Mr. Jenkins, he was emotional. He insisted I bring you this. He handed me a folded piece of paper. It was wrinkled, stained with what looked like tears and cheap hotel coffee. I unfolded it under the porch light. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't an apology. It was a demand. Liv, talk to the chief. Get me out. I can't stay in here with these people. She's crazy, Liv. She set me up. I need bail money. The accounts are frozen. Help me and we can talk. I stared at the scribbled words. Even at rock bottom, sitting in a cell because of his own lust and greed, he still thought I was his safety net. He still thought he could use me. He blamed her. He blamed the police. He blamed everyone but the man in the mirror. I looked at the letter. Then I looked at Jamal. Officer, I said, my voice steady and cool as the evening breeze, does he have a lawyer? He has a public defender appointed, ma'am. Good, I said. I slowly tore the letter in half, then in half again. Then he has everything he needs. I handed the scraps of paper back to Jamal. Tell Mr. Jenkins that the bank is closed, I said, permanently. Jamal smiled, a genuine proud smile. Yes, ma'am. I'll deliver the message. He tipped his hat to Tina and walked back to his cruiser. I watched the red taillights disappear down the street. I turned to my daughter. She was crying, but they were different tears now. They were tears of finality. He's gone, Mama, she whispered. He's really gone. No, baby, I said, pulling her into a hug that smelled of peaches and victory. He didn't just leave. We evicted him, and look at us. We're still standing. We went back inside. The cobbler was still warm. And let me tell you, that first bite tasted like freedom. The garden is blooming again. The roses are brighter this year. Maybe because I used a different fertilizer, or maybe because the toxicity is gone from the soil. Life is different now. Quiet, but full. The divorce was finalized last week. I kept the house. I kept my pension. And thanks to David's forensic accounting, the court ordered Carl to pay back every cent of the retirement dream fund, garnished from his unemployment checks. Yes, unemployment. Evelyn fired him before she got fired herself. It turns out when two snakes get in a pit, they eventually bite each other. I heard through the grapevine that Evelyn moved back north. She couldn't show her face in this town. As for Carl, he rents a small room above a garage on the east side. I see him at church sometimes. He sits in the back row now, not in the deacon's pew. We don't speak. I nod. He looks down. That is our new covenant. Maya's doing well. She doesn't ask about the white lady anymore. She asks about her homework, her dance class, and when we're going to bake cookies. We healed her. We surrounded her with so much love that the crack in her heart sealed up. As for me, I'm writing a book, not a cookbook, a book about survival. I sat on my porch this morning, drinking my coffee, looking at the sunrise. My phone buzzed. It was a text from a widower named Deacon Hayes. He wanted to know if I'd like to join him for coffee after service next Sunday. I looked at the text. I looked at my ring finger, bare and light for the first time in 35 years. I haven't replied yet. I'm taking my time. Because for the first time in my life, I know that the most important relationship I have is the one with the woman in the mirror and the God who watches over her. And she is doing just fine.